So welcome back everyone. So in this video we are going to solve cache with time limit. So let's get started. Okay, so we have to write a class that allows getting and setting key value pairs. However, a time until expiration is associated with each key. Now the class has three public methods: set function, get function, and count function. So set key value and duration, accept an integer key, an integer value, and a duration method in millisecond. Once the duration has elapsed, the key should be inaccessible. The method should return true if the same unexpired key already exists and false otherwise. Both the value and duration should be overwritten if the key already exists. So this is the main point here. So if the key is already there and it is unexpired, we have to override the value and duration of that key. Now the get function with the key, if an unexpired key exists, it should return the associated value, otherwise it should return -1. The count, return the count of unexpired keys. So let's see an example 1. So first they will create an object of this time limited cache, then they will call the set. So set is called at 0 millisecond. Okay. After get function is called at 50 millisecond. So at 50 milliseconds, when we call the get on key 1, we will return what? 42, because the key is still unexpired, because it is 50 millisecond and the key will live for 100 millisecond. Then the count is called at the same time at 50 millisecond, so it will return 1. Then the get is called at 150 millisecond, which means that the key has already expired at 100 millisecond, so it will return -1. Similarly, the next example. So first, before proceeding to solving this question, we'll see what this prototype thing is. So if you see the older versions of JavaScript, by older versions I mean that where there is no concept of the classes. So in that version, this is how the classes are created, and in the latest version, the classes are created with the class keyword. So first we'll understand what this is. So first let me write the class version of this. Okay, then I'll explain what this prototype thing is. So you can see this is a function, okay, time limited cache, and this is called here with new keyword, which means this is not a normal function. This is a constructor function. A constructor function has a special property that is called prototype. So this time limited cache is a constructor function and it has a special property that is prototype. And that prototype has three functions: set, get, and count. So this prototype belongs to a class. So let me show you another version of the same code. So we'll convert this to class. Okay. So this is class, and this class has three functions, that is set, get, and count. This is first function, which is set, get, and then finally count. So this is equivalent of the code that they have already written. Okay. So this is a class and it has three functions: set, get, and count. Okay. Okay, so I think it should be without function keyword. So in the newer versions of JavaScript, we can write classes like this. Now the important thing here is, what was that prototype thing? So first let me explain you prototype chain. Okay, so as I said, when you create a function, that is constructor function, the constructor function has a special property called prototype. So prototype. So this prototype property belongs only to a constructor function. So let's say I have this class. So this class have this prototype. So whatever we insert properties inside this prototype, all those properties, all those functions will be inherited by the instance of this class. So for example, this is class, let's say test. Okay, and I created objects out of this class. So for example, t1, t2, and t3. So whatever this prototype has will be inherited by t1, inherited by t2, and inherited by t3. By inherited, I means that these functions are not the part of object, they are inherited from this class. Okay, so that's prototype. So when you, let's say this is an object, so this object has a property. So this property has reference to this prototype. Okay, so what this proto is, this is nothing but an object, that is this object. Okay, now since object is not a constructor, okay, so this has some properties. So this is prototype, let's say prototype, and this is proto. So these both objects proto and classes prototype, these two are same thing. So these are same thing, but this class also inherit from it another class, that is object class. So every class inherits from another class, that is object class. So this is a prototype, or we can say proto for an object. Now this objects also inherit from others prototype, that is object prototype, but this object do not have prototype property because this is not a constructor. Okay, so this object inherits from this. An object has property, and since prototype is also an object, this is an object, so this object inherit from this object using a property. So what I'm saying is prototype chain. So object, this object proto is equivalent to prototype, that is this. Okay, now this also inherits from top level class, that is object. So this object also has what? Prototype, and this prototype inherits to this class using a property. So it stores a reference proto that is equal to object's prototype. Okay, so this is how this chain will go on. It's quite possible that you didn't understand anything, so we'll show you using the code examples. So let's see. Okay, so what we'll do is open your DevTools. So here what we'll do is we'll create one function, let's say log function, and what this log function will do is console.log and log. So this is a class we have created. Now as I said, this is a special class. Okay, so this is a constructor function, and every constructor function has a prototype property. So let's see if it has or not. So test has a prototype property. So this prototype stores this log function. Okay, so whenever an object is created, that object will inherit from this prototype. Okay, so now let me create an object. So constant, let's say t1, that is new test. So what it will do is this t1 object do not have its own log function, but the log function will come from test. So let's say t1 dot log function. When you call this log function, it is accessible by the t1 object, but from where does it come from? So when you write t1 dot proto, okay, so you see the log function. So t1 object has a proto property that is equal to test dot prototype. So let's see if it is equal or not. So test dot prototype, it is true. So t1 has a proto property that is equal to test dot prototype. So these two objects are same, which means t1 is not storing the copy of that object. Instead, it stores the reference to the test dot prototype. Now let me show you another thing. Now test dot prototype, okay, belongs to test class. Now test class also inherits from object class, which means test dot prototype. Okay, test dot prototype, this is an object. This object will inherit from what? Object. So object class, so it will have a prototype property, proto this. So you'll see these has these all functions which comes from the object class. For example, toString, value of, to localize string, these are the proto of object class. So let me show you. Object is a class, it has a prototype. So it has a prototype. You can see these two are same, and I can prove that. So here you can see test.prototype has a proto property that is equal to object.prototype. That's true. Okay, now let me show you one more thing. In the class we have created here, okay, so I told you that this log function will go into the prototype. Now there are things that only belongs to object. Okay, so what are those things? So let's see. Constructor we will create. So inside that constructor function we'll create this dot, let's say name, is Vishnu. Okay, so that name, this means the person who is calling functions of that test class. So for example, if I create, let's say first let's see the prototype. So test dot prototype. So in this prototype there is only a log function, there is no name, because name belongs to individual instances and prototype is common to class that every object will inherit. So let's create an object. So let's say t2 is new test. So when you create this, t2 dot proto will have only log function that is inherited from test class, but t2 has some properties of its own. So when you enter, you see this test has name property that belongs only to t2 object. It is not inherited from test class. Okay, so this object that is t2 has its own properties, that is name, that is Vishnu. Now it also inherits from a class that is log function. Okay, now this prototypes also inherit from object class, that is these are the values. So for example, when you call t2 dot to string, this function is function of object class. Okay, this function come from the object class, not from the test class. So what it does is t2 will check if there is a toString function in the test class. If it does not find, it will check in the upper prototype chain, that is object. So it will found there, so it will return this default values, that is object. Now let me show you. So in the test class we will create this toString function. Okay, toString. So whenever someone will call this console.log, we will return this dot name. Okay, that's it. So we'll create new object t2, that is new test, and we'll call t2 dot to string. So you see it returned the name. So as I told you, t2 will first check if there is a toString function in the test class. If it is, call that. So in this case, it found the toString function in the test class, so it called with Vishnu. But if it doesn't find, then it will call the per prototype chain, that is object class. And if this doesn't find there, then it will throw an error. Okay, so that's the prototype chaining. Now we'll solve the question. So for creating the cache, we'll create a constructor, and inside the constructor we'll store some properties that only belongs to an object. It doesn't belong to class. So to the class these three properties belong. So whenever an object is created, object will inherit all these three properties. Okay, but there are something that only belongs to an object, so that is a cache and the subscription array. So we'll store these values. So this dot cache. So what it will store is, it will store the key and the value. So this will be the cache. Then the other thing is subscriptions. What it will store is, so there will be a key and there is a subscription. Okay, so I'll tell you why we are creating this subscription array. First, this is the count function. We will complete this. So what it will do is, it will return the count of unexpired keys. So this cache will contain only those keys which are not expired. Okay, so we'll return object dot let's say keys of this dot cache dot length. Okay, so we'll get the keys on the cache object and then we'll return the length of that. So it will return the count of unexpired keys. Okay, now the get key. If an unexpired key exists, it should return the associated value. Otherwise, it should return -1. So we'll check if this dot cache has this key. But let's say the key is 0. Okay, key is 0 and value is 5. So this if will return false, but there is a key. So we'll have to check if it is not equal to undefined, which means the key does not have any value or the key does not exist. So if it is not undefined, then we will return this dot cache at key. So it will return the value, else we will return -1. Okay, so one more thing, what is this? So let's say here we have created an object. So this time limited cache is calling set, same object is calling get, same object is calling count. So this is equal to, so inside the function set, so inside the set function, this is equal to what, this object. Okay, this is equal to this. So that's why we have created these two things, this dot cache and this dot object. So these two things, cache and subs, belongs to object, that is this, and that this is equal to this object. Okay, so for example, if you created this one and you created this second object. Okay, so if you create something like 2, 2 and 2, so these are two different objects, right? These are two different objects. So when you call time limited cache dot set, that inside the set function, that this keyword is equal to this, and when you call time limited cache 2 dot set, then the this inside the set function is equal to this object, and each object has its own cache, own subscriptions. Okay, so it will return the value appropriately. Now the last function, that is set function. So inside the set function, we'll have to check if there is a key or not. First, we'll check that if the key already exists or not. So if this dot cache of key is not equal to undefined, then we know that the key already exists. Okay, and we'll return already exists. So what it will do is, if the key is already existing, it will return true, and if it doesn't exist, it will return false. So the thing here is, the method should return true if the same unexpired key already exists, and false otherwise. Now the one thing is left, that is both the values and duration should be overwritten if the key already exists. And the other thing is that after the time duration has elapsed, the key should be inaccessible, which means we have to delete this key. Okay, so we have to set the new value cache dot key and the new value, that is we are, if the key at this key, if the value does not exist already, let's say already exist is false, which means that at this key the value does not exist, then we will initialize this. But let's say if the value already exists, then we check here, yes, it is already existing, and we override the value, but we have to also override the duration. Okay, so how should we override? So let's see, we'll do set timeout of duration, and in this duration we will delete this dot cache at this key. So if this, after this duration, we will delete this key, and what it will do is, it will make the key inaccessible, because inside this cache, when we try to get this, the key will be undefined, because we are deleting this key after this duration. Now the complex thing here is, the left out part is, how are we making sure this things works fine when we are overriding. Now let's say initially you came, so there is no key, so the key will be set, the duration will be set, let's say 50 milliseconds, duration 50, and you return already exist, no, it does not exist initially. You call the same function again instantly, so already exist, yes, true, so it will return true, that's correct. But now we will override the value, we will set timeout, and let's say now duration is 100 milliseconds. Now in 100 millisecond it should delete, but the last timer, that is 50 milliseconds, will execute at 50 milliseconds, and that timer will delete the key, which we don't want. We are overriding the value, we should also override the duration. We don't want to call this timeout in 50 millisecond, but we want to reset that to 100 millisecond. Okay, so what we will do is, this is the subscriptions. So inside the subscription, okay, we will store, for this key we will store this subscription, this current subscription. First we will take the latest subscription, so let's say const current subscription. Okay, we'll store this, and when this duration, we have created this, and now we will clear timeout of old subscription. So this will be the old subscription. So initially it will be undefined. So clear timeout will do nothing. But the next time it will come, it will create a new duration, clear the past duration. Okay. After doing that, we will initialize that subscription to the current subs. Okay. And if this function is called, which means we are deleting the cache, then we can also delete the subs, because you know that the cache key is already deleted, then there is no point of clearing timeout. We can also delete the subscription, because if we don't delete, then with the time the subscription object will keep on increasing. So let's see again. Initially the key does not exist, so we'll see already exists, it will be false, so it will return false. We will set the value, we will set the timeout. Clear timeout will do nothing because the key will be null. Now we will set the key. Okay, so this clear subscription will be set to the key, will return false. Again, this function is called instantly. Already exist, true, yes. Key will be overridden, yes. We'll set a new subscription of 100 millisecond, let's say. Old subscription with 50 millisecond will be cancelled. New subscription is assigned to this subscription key, and then we will return. So now let's see if this can pass all the test cases or not. Okay, so both of our test case has been passed. Now we will submit this. And our solution got accepted. So the main thing that this question, this is one of the best question. So what we saw in this question is, first thing is we saw what are classes, the prototype chaining. The second thing is properties that belongs only to objects, and the properties that belong to the prototype. Okay, and the use of this keyword. So this keyword means the person who are calling this get function. If you are calling the get function using this object, then this will be equal to this object. If you are calling this set function with time limited cache 2, then this will be equal to time limited cache 2. Okay,